me clearly?
Yes, yes, you are all good.
Right, excellent, thank you. Okay, so everybody's done the Bhakti Shastra, I take it, and situated all over ISKCON by the sound of it.
Yeah.
Okay, rightio. All right. I have been thinking about tolerance, and I wanted to just talk about what tolerance is and the way Prabhupada defines it, and also consider some examples of tolerance in our tradition, our tradition in relationship to the parampara, our tradition in relationship to the Chaitanya Leela, and also in the Bhagavatam, and examples that Srila Prabhupada, well, one example in particular, but examples that Srila Prabhupada has given us. Then I wanted to look at, or have us consider what tolerance is in our lives, and in particular how tolerance is cultivated and manifest in our participation in the Sankirtan pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada, as they manifest in our lives, as mundane as they may be. And I think it's important. We need to be able to take these qualities or these qualifications into our daily lives and see them in action in our lives. And sometimes we fail to see these qualifications or qualities being tested or being developed in our own devotional lives, and we need to do that because our learning, if you like, really needs to be very practical. And studying books is one thing, and being able to recite lists of say quality. We have the 26 qualities of a devotee, for example, and you may or you or I may be able to list the 26 qualities of a devotee, but putting them into practice is really another dimension. And of course, it's a dimension of devotional service where we're being tested every day. We may not come up to the mark of somebody like Srila Prabhupada or Prahlad Maharaj or Haridas Thakur, for that matter, just to mention a few examples. But meditating on the character or the manifestation of those qualifications, or the quality, in this particular case, tolerance, analysing how to cultivate tolerance, and seeing it in the examples of others, and meditating on the characteristics, if you like, or the tolerance seen in the character of others is helpful and beneficial. And then again, coming back to the personal and to the community, we need to exercise and develop that individually, but also as a community of devotees, as a preaching community, especially because, and I mentioned before, whether we like it or not, in ISKCON, we are the manifest pastimes of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. We sometimes forget that. And we sometimes forget that what's happening to us is it's a spiritual activity. It can be inspiring and uplifting and enlivening. Even some of the more mundane aspects of our day-to-day lives are actually part of our development in Krishna consciousness. So anyway, is it possible for you to interact? Or I'm going to be asking, because when I'm teaching, I generally like to interact with the students. Does anybody have any objection? Is there going to be any technological hassle to doing that? Prashanta, do you know? Okay, maybe Prasanta's not there. I'm going to just test something here. Okay, what do I need to do? Here we go. I'm going to look at the gallery view, and I'm going to ask you all to raise your virtual hand. Can you do that? No, that's your real hand. I want to see your virtual hand. Yes, that's good. Okay. Okay, raise your real hand if you don't know how to raise your virtual hand. Okay, rightio. In Zoom, you have the option to raise your hand. And on my screen, it's part of reactions. It's down the bottom. I'm using a PC, so I don't know where it might be in an Apple Mac or iPad. But there's a menu bar at the bottom. It may be in the top, on the top, but there's an option there called reactions. And if you press that, you can clap, you can raise your thumb, you can cry, you can go, you can show you like something, but you can raise your hand. Can you see it? If you do, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, we've only got, okay, keep going. Yep, keep going. That's good, getting more hands up. Okay. So you can, okay, raise your hand and keep it raised. Don't lower it, just keep it. I want to see how many people we can get engaged in this conversation. Raise your virtual hand, keep it raised. Yeah. Mutu, can you raise your hand? Oh, I can't even see you. I think we've just got we've got the picture of a window. Oh, yes, there's somebody there. Can you raise your hand? Or at least unmute yourself. Avinash, can you raise your virtual hand? Or unmute yourself so I can talk to you? Okay, we're getting more. That's good.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We want to be able to use this virtual technology to it. So okay, we've got 18 participants out of 25. Not bad. I would suggest to those other of you who haven't got your hand raised, please do you know how to use Google? Go to Google and type in, how do you raise your hand in Zoom? Right. Okay, rightio. So stay tuned. Keep your microphones off for now, but I may call on you to, you can lower your hands, everybody. Thank you. Now, what do we think about when we reflect on tolerance? When I think of tolerance, the first thing I meditate on is chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. Matra spashashta kuntaya sittosna sukadukataha agama payano nityas tangstatichaspa bharata. Krishna presents tolerance as one of the first instructions that he gives to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita related to transcendental knowledge, which is quite interesting. The first thing that Krishna explains is effectively, we're not the body. We're the constant or the steady, the kutashta within the body, and that's the self. So that's the first basic item, that our lives go through the various changes, the 6 changes, right? And the soul remains the constant, that sense of self, that sense of identity, based on the spiritual principle of the presence of the Jivatma. And that throughout all of those changes, so we've got, boyhood, youth, middle age, old age, dwindling, and then finally death, which are the changes of the body. And then the next instruction is, and so, you're not the body, and we go through all of these various changes. And then the next instruction is, one has to tolerate. So more or less the second instruction in the Bhagavad Gita is, you're not the body, you're a spirit soul, and you have to tolerate, or we have to tolerate all of the changes that we go through, in order to remain fixed on that spiritual identity, or in order to even understand or relate to our spiritual identity, we have to develop tolerance. So tolerance is a basic fundamental of spiritual life. And to echo that, the essential, the necessity of tolerance, in Lord Chaitanya's instructions, we get in the Shikshastakam, we get a glorification of the Sankirtan Yajna, right? Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Punam Ritasvardhanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. So an essential element, Srila Prabhupada teaches us, in the cultivation of tolerance, this very essential ingredient to making advancement in spiritual life, Lord Chaitanya tells us that, first of all, and Srila Prabhupada echoes this also in his instructions, in order to develop tolerance, you have to chant Hare Krishna. But also at the same time, he says, if you want to chant Hare Krishna, you need to develop tolerance. It's interesting dialectic, or an interesting dichotomy. And so the second instruction in the Shikshashtaka from Lord Chaitanya is, and this brings in another concept, Trinadapi Sunichena. Trinadapi, oh sorry, whoops, hang on, where am I now? What's the first line of the second verse of the Shikshashtaka? Anybody like to venture?
नामनामकारी बहुधा निज सर्वशक्तिस्तर्पिता नियमित स्मरण कालः तादृशी तव कृपा भगवान्.
That's the third, isn't it?
No, this is second.
That's second. Oh, so what's the third? Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi. That's what I'm looking for. Tororeva Sahishnuna. Yeah, sorry, third verse. Yeah. So the first item is being humble, not seeking, be more. What's the word? Having the mood of being lower than a blade of grass. And Prabhupada mentions that one shouldn't seek to be praised by others. Humility. But then he says, Tarorapi Suhishnana, one should be more tolerant than a tree. And Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari, in order to be able to chant Hare Krishna 24 hours a day, or in order to always be able to chant, one needs to cultivate this mood of being lower than a blade of grass, being more tolerant as a tree, respecting others and not expecting respect for oneself. And with those four qualities, which includes tolerance, one can chant Hare Krishna constantly. So Krishna emphasizes this point of tolerance, and Lord Chaitanya also references the qualification or the cultivation of tolerance in order to be successful in one's spiritual practice or in the application of devotional service. So the cultivation of tolerance and these other three qualities are important or essential, if you like. Feeling oneself very insignificant. Being respectful to others and not looking for respect for oneself are not necessarily easy, because, you know, most of the time we're thinking ourselves very well. I speak for myself. Very often thinking of myself as very important, being disrespectful to others, and wondering why people aren't always offering, you know, and respecting myself. This is a general. This is a mood that we have to watch and be careful of. And tolerance is, it's a characteristic that needs to be developed also, because when people are, at least from our perception, interfering in what we're doing, providing obstacles, creating problems for us, then we question them. We question their validity. We question their sincerity. Whereas the mood of devotee means, and we see it amply in the examples of the previous acharyas and the example of those in the Bhagavatam, how there's great humility, there's great tolerance, there's respect for others, and that mode of not seeking personal aggrandizement as a result of our service. So our bhajan, our sadhana, our development of anatta nivritti, our development of taste, ruchi, for performing devotional service, and our moving to the higher stages, ashakti and bhava and prema, if we're so fortunate. And Prabhupada says, our practice of Krishna consciousness is meant to gradually elevate us through these stages of bhakti till we come to the point of prema bhakti. Our process is to come to the point of prema bhakti. And our practice in the beginning stages is is in part dependent on us developing a taste, if you like, or a cultivation of tolerance, and tolerance in the form of tapasya, right? The performance of austerity, or taking on some difficulty that we might not ordinarily embrace, but because it's favourable. In the 64 items of devotional service, Rupa Goswami explains that the first item of devotional service is to take shelter. Guru Padashraya is to take shelter of the spiritual master. And then the next qualification is the next item is to inquire. Next item's basically about inquiry. But then there's a kind of a warning from Rupa Goswami where he says, we need to be prepared. This is in the beginning, and also throughout the practice of our devotional service, we need to be prepared to accept things that ordinarily we might not want, and we're to reject things that ordinarily we might want, right? And so in the beginning of our devotional practice, we have a form of tolerance in the practice of tapasya. And that tapasya is very simple, chanting 16 rounds, following the regulative principles. And then, as also recommended by Rupa Goswami, there are the items that are positive, utsahan nischaya daryat, enthusiasm, determination, patience, and then the things that we are advised to avoid. Over endeavor, over collect, atyahara prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha. So there are these positive actions and negative prohibitions. These are a form of tapasya and a form of tolerance. So in the beginning, we practiced the cultivation of tolerance by following the order of the spiritual master, and primarily or essentially following the 64 items of devotional service as provided by Rupa Goswami. So tolerance is cultivated in the beginning stages by the acceptance of these penances and austerities. And even that, I notice in the devotees, and certainly in my life, one of the first great austerities that I had to do was shave my head. That's because I was attached to having long hair as a youth. The next austerity for me was then joining the Harinam Sankirtan party. I don't know if you've had that experience, but that was a huge challenge, a challenge for all of us, because one has to don his Hare Krishna robes and bald head and tilak, and then go out into public and demonstrate and present oneself as a representative of Krishna, as a representative of Lord Chaitanya. Now that automatically puts you, or puts us, into the limelight and into the glare of public, into the glare of the public, if you like. In India, that may not be such a big thing, but I know in countries outside of India, for the devotees, that's a challenge, because it's more culturally acceptable in India. Although standing up and being counted as a Vaishnava may not be as easy for some, because they may come from a different family tradition, different parampara, but it's a test, and so there are tests. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains there's the hot and cold of winter and summer and winter seasons. There are the austerities, or the tolerance that's developed by just accepting what comes in daily life. But there are also austerities, and going out on Harinam actually is not that much of austerity. For most of us, it's a great pleasure. But in the course of preaching, one will be met with many challenges, many challenges. Management challenges, family challenges, community challenges, social challenges in preaching, and these challenges in day-to-day life, and especially within our preaching, we voluntarily accept. A good example of this is, Srila Prabhupada himself. I don't know if you noticed recently in the ISKCON news, but one of our well-wishers, Thomas Hopkins, who was a student of the Bhagavad Purana and the Vaishnav theology in general. He recently passed away, and he was a friend of ISKCON, a friend of Srila Prabhupada, a great admirer of ISKCON and Srila Prabhupada. in fact, he mentions how he would see the young devotees on the streets chanting with great enthusiasm and dressed in the attire of, you know, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And he was bemused as to what he was seeing. And he said, it all made sense when he met Srila Prabhupada. And then he could understand where, you know, where all of the enthusiasm and where the dress and the behavior of the young devotees was coming from the deep spiritual tradition that was being channeled by Srila Prabhupada effectively. So when he met Srila Prabhupada, and he made a comment that the young devotees that were associating with Srila Prabhupada could not have imagined the austerities and the obstacles and challenges that Srila Prabhupada had to face in bringing Krishna consciousness from its traditional roots, its traditional soil, if you like. The bhakti is a bhakti vriksha is a tree, and you've got to plant that tree in some soil. And you know, the bhakti tree planted in the soil of Bharatvarsha and the Indian culture, Hindu culture, if you like, it's nourishing. But it's interesting, it's really interesting, isn't it, that, you know, where traditionally bhakti culture would thrive, it wasn't in the 50s and the 60s of Srila Prabhupada's India. And so he decided, okay, well, let me follow the order of my spiritual master. And just in doing that, Srila Prabhupada embraced so many challenges and so many obstacles and so many difficulties. But he decided, he was asked, you know, once, why did you go to New York? And Prabhupada said, well, I got a ticket to New York, and I thought, well, might as well fail in New York as in London or any other place. But of course, Srila Prabhupada embracing the instructions of his spiritual master, and that's a key element of, you know, developing tolerance, is by following the instructions of the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada was able to establish Krishna consciousness in the Western hemisphere, and was eventually, you know, ultimately successful. But you know, we can only imagine. But you know, Prabhupada mentioned to his disciples that every week he would go to the Scindia steamship company and look at the timetable to see when the boats were returning to India, right? And so, you know, sometimes people like to think, oh, Srila Prabhupada, you know, everything was calm and rosy and peaceful when Srila Prabhupada was present. But you can be sure that Srila Prabhupada establishing ISKCON, when he was the only devotee effectively present, and even when he wasn't the only devotee, he was experiencing great difficulties and shouldering more burdens than we can imagine in establishing Krishna consciousness. Yet, what did he remain? He always remained as being tolerant. On one visit to Calcutta, Srila Prabhupada was visiting one of his friends, whose daughter was later became his disciple. And I've forgotten what her name is. But she mentions the story how Srila Prabhupada in the early 70s met with her father and told him how difficult it was for him to manage ISKCON, because it was expanding at such a rapid rate. And keep in mind, Prabhupada was managing ISKCON without the benefits of Zoom, if you can call it a benefit, and certainly there are benefits. Prabhupada was managing ISKCON, a burgeoning ISKCON all over the world, and finding it difficult. And yet still, we don't find instances of where Srila Prabhupada is complaining about the problems and the difficulties that he faced. Very rare. Even though his disciples, in some cases, were behaving in very unexpected ways, or even ways that brought disrepute to the society, which we find Srila Prabhupada tolerating those difficult circumstances, tolerating the behaviour of his disciples, and always being proactive about how to solve problems. Pretty much, you know, you might find it occasionally, like in this recollection of one of his disciples, but very rare. So we see in Srila Prabhupada's life, you know, this great tolerance, and in spite of great difficulties, and that has to be expected. We have to expect that if we become a member of ISKCON and we engage in our sadhana practice, we'll be performing austerities that we need to tolerate. And if we're preaching, which is really, you know, that's joining ISKCON, sometimes we don't realize it. Or well, I would suggest that many of us don't really appreciate and understand in our formative years what we're actually signing up for, what we're getting ourselves into. But we discover, or you will discover if you haven't already, that joining ISKCON means we're joining Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan party, if you like, Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan mission. And so becoming a devotee is declaring war on Maya, but, you know, becoming a member of the Sankirtan party, becoming a book distributor, becoming a preacher, converting, you know, the innocent to devotees. That's hand-to-hand combat, and requires great determination and great humility. It means always offering respect to others, very often having to tolerate disrespect or imagined disrespect, perceived disrespect, if you like. And if we embrace these opportunities that will exist in you know, practicing our sadhana and preaching and becoming an active member of ISKCON, then we'll be and following the order of the Guru, following the orders of the spiritual master is essential. That's the, you know, Prabhupada says that's the prime qualification that's required for a devotee. Then we'll get opportunities to cultivate tolerance in, you know, in bucketfuls, in barrowfuls, in truckloads, actually. Depending on how much we embrace the preaching opportunities that come in ISKCON, then we'll get an opportunity, you'll get plenty of opportunities to practice tolerance and also cultivate tolerance. So, now, the example that comes to mind is the tree. Oh, we've got hands up. Okay, let's take some questions now. We've got hands up if that's what's happening. Anjali, did you have your hand up first? You're first in the queue anyway, that I can see. Do you have a question? You got your hand up. Okay. Gopangana, have you got a question? You've got your hand up. And you're also mute. Anjali, you're mute. Did you have a question? No, gone. Okay.
Hare Krishna. No, Prabhuji, I don't have any question. Actually, you just asked them to raise hand, so I just left it raise.
Okay, no worries. Anjali, oh, sorry, Ambika, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to ask that to which extent should we tolerate, of course, to continue practicing Krishna consciousness for the whole lifetime, but at which point would it be like favorable to change the situation, or is it even an option?
Are you referring, Ambika, to a situation where it's difficult to practice Krishna consciousness, or there may be somebody who's creating obstacles for you?
Yes, but not personally, just as an example.
A general example.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to speak from personal experience. I would suggest that depending on the nature of depending on your nature or our natures, it would be appropriate to, as quickly as possible, ascertain what your Prabhu Datta Desh is, you know, what your Guru and what Krishna has provided you for your service. And that may change. That may change throughout life. You know, say, for example, we're a student and then we have to seek employment. We may change our ashram to from, say, single student to householder. So there are points in life where we do have to make changes, but and they're natural changes that come about just as a consequence of moving through our ashrams and moving through our vana, you know, our occupational engagement in life. But the sooner that we can identify with our Siksha Gurus and with our Diksha Guru what our Prabhu Datta Desh is, given the different ashrams and vana stages that we might go through, the sooner we do that, the better. And that may require some, you know, some adjustment. But once we've worked out what our Prabhu Datta Desh, where we should be, what our engagement should be, then we should, as much as possible, stick to that. Sometimes there are going to be circumstances where we're going to have to contemplate the need for change, and that is our right. That is our, even within ISKCON, you know, you may join in one location and find that that's not suitable for your practice. There may be people who are not encouraging, or maybe people who are even discouraging us or trying to dissuade us. It is not uncommon within ISKCON. And so there may be circumstances where we do need to change, and we do that in consultation with our spiritual, you know, with our Siksha and Diksha Gurus. But by and large, if we can find a stable environment that's favourable, there will always be challenges, but is generally favourable, then we should stick to it. And then what we'll find is, by sticking at one thing over time, you'll develop a service, you'll develop relationships, you'll be part, hopefully, ideally, of an ISKCON team that's promoting and pushing forward Krishna consciousness for each of the individuals in the community, but also for the greater community that exists in. So once we've determined, ashram, worked that out, occupation, got that worked out what location is best suited for our pursuance of those goals in that context, then we should stick at it, even if there are going to be problems, because there is, Prabhupada says we're not utopian. We're never ever going to create a perfect environment where there's this notion that, I'm chanting Hare Krishna and I've got my guru, and I know what my ashram is, and I've got my occupational engagement sorted out, and now everything should be fine. Forget about it. That is never going to happen unless you're even if you're a great saintly person. Look at Srila Prabhupada. Look at the struggles that he endured to preach. So we need to expect that there will be challenges that we need to be tolerant of, and best to stick at it when we find the best, when we in consultation with our spiritual guides, we find that place that's best suited for us, best to stick at it, even if there are problems, because there will always be problems. And if we switched, whenever there was a problem, we'd never be stable anywhere. Anybody else? Is that okay?
Hare Krishna.
Yes, thank you very much.
Who was speaking then? We've got Yaji and Lalita Pritimai. Let's go.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Sorry, I'm kind of like in a public place right now, so it might not be easy for me to turn on the video because I got a bunch of people behind me, if that's okay.
Oh, we'd love to see you where you are.
I'm with a bunch of other people behind me, but
It's okay. It's okay. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So you were saying in order to be tolerant, we need to develop humility. Recently, what I found challenging is I think a lot of times like we need to feel empowered. We need to feel like I can do this. But that feeling of empowerment, sometimes it feels like a bit individualistic, or sometimes even a little bit egoistic in a way. So my question is, how do we reconcile the feeling of empowerment and the humility at the same time, so we could develop some tolerance in Krishna conscious movement? Could you please clarify on that? Thank you.
So how to cultivate the enthusiasm and the confidence?
Yeah, how to feel like, I think a lot of times, maybe
And
just
be
myself,
humble.
I need to feel like empowered, but at the same time, humble at the same time.
Yeah, well, I haven't quite worked that one out, to be honest. Because sometimes I chant Hare Krishna and I feel like Superman after I've chanted Hare Krishna, and then charge off in the pursuit of Sankirtan goals, and then discover later on that actually I was impelled by the boat of passion. And that's why, that's why we're recommended to be very determined. And again, that's tolerance. So it's something that needs to be, it's a skill that needs to be honed on a daily basis. And also, we need to appreciate that our devotional practice also will go through various stages, right? And there's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains how, one of the first stages is Utsamahi, which means puffed up with enthusiasm. We've just become a devotee. We're following the regulated principles. We're chanting 16 rounds and we're feeling very enthusiastic. We feel like we're a Paramahamsa. And that's okay. That's actually a stage that you go through. It's like when we're teenagers, and I don't know if you may not have done this, but I know when I was 15, I thought my father was pretty stupid. Right? I thought, I know everything, and my dad, he's just a bit of a dumbo. You know what I mean by dumbo? Is the root of the word is dumb, which kind of in Australian English slang means stupid. But it wasn't until I was 40 years of age, and then I realised, oh, gee, my dad's pretty smart actually. So when we're very young, we think we know everything, and it happens like that, or it can happen like that as part of devotional practice. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur identifies that stage as Utsahamai, being puffed up with enthusiasm. Yeah, I've got this together. I know what I'm doing. Right. So we're going to go through various stages in our lives where we may be overcome by enthusiasm, but misapplied, if you like. And, in some occasions where actually we should act, but we're feeling humble, and so therefore we don't act when we should have. Because sometimes the devotees will say, oh, no, Prabhu, I can't do this. I shouldn't do this. This is not appropriate for me. I can't do it. Whereas we're being encouraged by our guru or by our peers, our friends and spiritual peers and superiors. You should do this. You should do this. And then out of false humility, we don't do it, which is also the flip side of, being puffed up with enthusiasm. We become puffed up with despondency, if you like, and fail to act. So there'll be various stages that we go through, and that's why it's best to develop a strong sadhana and then
Looks like we lost Aniruddha Prabhu. I'll just connect to him and I'll see. I'll update you all. Hopefully, we should have Aniruddha Prabhu back in few minutes. Let's see. Yes, we have Prabhu.
Hi, Bo. Hang on.
Yes, Prabhu, we can hear you.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, sorry about that. My PC, I forgot to plug my PC in, so battery went flat. Okay, so where was I? Yes, cultivating enthusiasm and determination to, I guess, build our confidence. Good sadhana is essential for doing that. And even if you think your sadhana is not good, when you actually get out, this happened to me many times. I thought my sadhana was very poor, but I've gone to the Bhagavatam class, I've chanted my rounds, I've been to Mangalati, greeted the deities. I feel, there's always that surge of enthusiasm after the Bhagavatam class when it comes to breakfast time. I don't know if you've experienced that or not. And then getting out on Sankirtan and then discovering that the austerity that you put in just in doing one's morning program translates into confidence and enthusiasm in pursuing your service. So it's, a regular sadhana practice, regular sadhana program, and tolerating, just putting up with the difficulties, and then getting out and doing your service, your day-to-day service, can be, it can have a major effect. So it's a lot of it's just it's steadiness, and of course then you get the vice versa, where you've chanted your rounds, you think you've chanted really good rounds, you had a great morning program, and then you proceed to wade into the most difficult day that you've ever had in your life. So tolerance in one sense means just practicing tolerance, just practicing it, just doing it, and being in the thick of it. And even though there are difficulties, just keep on keeping on. It's said, you just keep doing it. Okay, Lalita.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, my doubt is like, this is been recently it is applicable for me now. It's happening recently for me. Like when there is no reciprocation from the scriptures we are reading, like it's not more retaining in the memory, and I'm not able to apply that in my practical life, and it's becoming very difficult to tolerate this part, because previously I have experienced the joy in reading books, and now it's no more. It has just disappeared. So how to tolerate this, and how to get that back? So how to get that taste back?
Go on Sankirtan. Go and do some Sankirtan, Harinam, or book. Do something else. I've had the experience where I've been reading, and I think, oh boy, I'm not really absorbing any of this. Right? And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm talking to somebody, and then all of a sudden, all the things that I read come out. They just come out, and in coherent, in a cogent form, in an articulated form. And then you realise, whoa, I thought I wasn't absorbing anything, and I wasn't, and service isn't always ecstatic. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes, and even that's a symptom then of the mode of goodness, in that in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, what might be poison in the beginning and then becomes nectar in the end is in the mode of goodness, especially with study. Some days we read something and we think, wow, that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard, right? But then on other days we're reading and we think, God, this is like chewing cardboard, right? But we don't appreciate the impact of what we're actually doing. We don't appreciate, and we don't necessarily realize that until down the track we're able to put it into practice, or we're able to share it with others. And when I think about it, that's an important element, and that's why I was suggesting go on Sankirtan, go on book distribution. When we're actively sharing what we're learning with others, then that then reinforces and corroborates the importance of study, even though at the time that we were doing the study, it felt like, we were lifting, Mount Meru. So, yeah, we've got to be careful. We've got to be careful about the mind. The mind will always be saying, oh, no, this is terrible. You shouldn't be doing this, when things are tough or the going gets tough. But rather we need to persevere and avoid the flickering mind's, demands. You should be doing something that's more, nectar. You need some more nectar in your life. Nectar will come and go. But if we stick to, especially in study, you may think that you're not learning, but actually you are. And you'll appreciate the value of what you're learning later on when you're able to then share it with others, and you appreciate, and not only that, you have the practical, because, there's the learning, the rote learning, if you like, but then there's also the practical application. So if you can harness the details and the facts and are able to apply it in your own life in context and help others apply it in their lives within context, then that's Vigyan, and that's where you get the satisfaction from what you're actually doing. That's when you realize the importance of, some of the basic things that you might be doing now, and that you need to stick at it, not be distracted. Right? You've chosen to be a student now, and it's not always easy. Is that right?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Hare Krishna. Muthu, Lakshmi. Muthu, how do they call you? Muthu or Lakshmi?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna. Tell us.
What? Prabhu, I am not good in English. Somewhat I am trying to understand your English.
My English. Yeah, my English is Australian English.
I am not good in English, Prabhu.
Okay. What language are you good
So
in?
I will understand little bit.
Yeah. What language
Tamil,
are you good
Prabhu.
in? Tamil. Okay. there we go.
Tamil.
Yep. Okay, tell me. Do you have a question?
No, Prabhu, no, Prabhu. I am listening and observing each and every word, Prabhu.
Okay, very good. Okay, just got your hand up, so I thought you might want to say something.
No, Prabhu.
Okay, all right, okay. Does anybody else have a comment or a question?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji Dandatam.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu, I have a question that when we have association of some kind of devotees, I mean, in sort of tolerance, we are having association, some devotees, though those are very tolerant, very good and tolerant. They are very humble. But sometimes we get association of totally opposite kind of people. And maybe long time, or we have to recite. I mean, so as I always learn, and it is true association make effect on our overall personality. So how do we get unaffected from this, Prabhuji? Actually, we are getting tolerance from people, of associating people with those who have tolerance, but those do not have tolerance, and we are getting association of that people, and we have to tolerate that association also. So how
Yeah.
can we get unaffected? I mean, it may be possible.
Yeah. Well, Rupa Goswami recommends that we learn how to identify the various levels of devotee. And that's basically beginning, middle, and advanced, right, elevated. We need to be able to identify a Kanishta Adhikari. We need to know, we also need to know where we are, where we're situated. And it is important, as you've mentioned, because Krishna mentions that Sangat Sanjayate Karma, that we'll become like those we associate with, right? So, and we shouldn't be surprised that within life there's a spectrum, or there's a range of the different type of devotees that we'll come in contact with, and they'll be of all types, different types, right? That we have to expect that and not be surprised by it. And even if we are in the company of devotees who maybe don't show as complete a development of the bhakti character, we still have to be respectful to them, right? What is it? Krishneti yasya giritam manasadriyeta. This is in the Nectar of Instruction. We should be, and this is Lord Chaitanya's instruction, we should be respectful to everybody. This is, our basic our base persona, if you like, is to be respectful to everyone. And then to those who are initiated, Dikshasti Chet Pranati Bis Bhajantam Isham is the next instruction by Rupa Goswami, which says basically that we should offer our obeisances and effectively make friends with those who are initiated. In other words, those who are on the path of perfection, those who are in the clearing stage of chanting Hare Krishna and performing bhakti. They're removing their anarthas, and they're removing moods or attitudes or actions that might create an offense, either to the deity or to Krishna or to the devotees or the spiritual master. So we want that association, the association of devotees, like-minded devotees who are trying to make advancement by clearing away the unwanted things. And then we serve and honor and even worship those devotees Rupa Goswami says, who are freed from the propensity to criticize others. So advanced devotees who are very tolerant. And one of the things that Prabhupada explains is that tolerance is also a symptom and comes naturally to one who's making spiritual advancement and who's stita pragya, right, who's steady in devotion and devotional service, and who's fixed up, a fixed up devotee, and who's basically on the Raganuga platform. This quality of tolerance will manifest automatically in one who's reached the Raganuga platform of bhakti. So in the beginning we cultivate it, but in the end it'll come naturally. The tolerance of difficulty and different, you know, and so, you know, look at Prahlad Maharaj, look at Haridas Thakur and other examples. We'll see the quality of tolerance manifest very strongly or manifest naturally. So how do we do that? We need to be respectful to everybody. We need to know who to associate with and who not to. You know, even there are devotees who should be avoided, not disrespected, right? But we generally don't take up their association because they might not be free from some of the unwanted habits. They may not be free from the propensity to criticize others. You know, so that way we need to choose our association by, first of all, identifying where we are situated in our devotional practice, Kanishta, Madhya. We need also to identify those qualities in others and then know who to serve and then who to make friends with. This is what's recommended by Rupa Goswami. So we need to know what the qualifications are. We need to identify the qualifications in ourselves, identify the qualities in others, and then match ourselves up with those who are like-minded. And that means those who are on the path of perfection. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
And that's not so easy, by the way. Not so easy. Kasturika.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much. I just want to give a comment. When you mentioned about Srila Prabhupada's, when you mentioned about Srila Prabhupada embracing so many difficulties on the order of his spiritual master, along with the tolerance, you mentioned that he wasn't complaining. I think that is the most important as well, because sometimes we think we are tolerating, but inside us we might be complaining, like grudging.
Inside we're complaining.
Yeah, or maybe we are grudging.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. I found that is very, very important quality. Along with tolerance, we understand why we are tolerating it.
Yep, and that will come naturally the more advanced we are. Where you know, there are difficulties, but we won't even, you know, it's not, you know, they won't be, what do you call it? We won't even see it as being a problem or an issue. We just accept it as service and we just move on to the next thing and the next thing. And maintaining, you know, an enthusiasm and confidence that, you know, things will work out, even though there are challenges, depending on Krishna, really. And you know, you see that in the example of a tree. Prabhupada uses the example of a tree, where the tree may be giving, despite the fact that it's had its legs and arms chopped off, and the fruits have been taken, and the tree's being exploited almost, yet the tree continuously gives. The trees give us the air that we breathe, right? And so, the mood of a devotee is such that even though there may be obstacles or challenges, or they're being even exploited, still they're happy to give. And Prabhupada did that.
But when you say it is naturally coming, how do we know it's naturally manifesting or not in us?
When you didn't have to think about it. Right? Although this may not be entirely related, but I remember how I used to serve prasadam. The mentality that I used to serve prasadam. I used to serve breakfast every morning. And I used to like burfi, you know what the Melbourne burfi's like. And I also used to like the 9 o'clock sabjis and the puris, right? So I'd be serving up, and because I was a new devotee, I had to, I had to serve out, and I was last in the queue. And I used to think, there'd be 5 more people to serve, and there was only one burfi on the tray. And I'd be praying, Krishna, make sure that they don't ask for that burfi. Right? Because I wanted the burfi for myself. But these days when I serve out prasadam, I'm not that I've made a lot of advancement, but I don't particularly worry about whether I've got to get the last burfi or not. So, and that's maybe just I grew up, not necessarily that I made any spiritual advancement. But, just in general, we face a difficulty, and then we think, oh no, this is going to be really hard. Whereas, a mature devotee, or, an advanced devotee just takes on the service, and they know, well, one day it's going to shine, next day it's going to rain, but let's just keep doing our service, and not really thinking about the fact that it's raining or it's cold or whatever, but just embracing the service to Krishna, because it's service to the Guru and service to Krishna, and that's pleasing and that's actually satisfying. That makes sense?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Okay, I need to get going. I've got people buzzing me for another call that I should be on. So I better get going, and we'll get together tomorrow.
Friday.
Oh, Friday. Okay. I want to give some homework.
Yes.
A little bit of homework. And that is, I want you to list individuals who are examples of tolerance in our tradition. Try to come up with a list of 5 or 6 personalities who are exemplars or examples of tolerance. Then I want you to, from 1 or 2 or 3 of those, list why they're examples of tolerance. Is that okay? And then we'll talk about that. And then on Friday,
Hare Krishna, can you please repeat the second one? I didn't get it. 1 or 2
I have
example
put in
of
the chat. Yeah, it is in the chat.
Somebody's written it in the chat for us. Yep. And then and we might then talk about how we can apply it in our lives. Cultivation of tolerance, how we can do that. Or even, you might want, here's something you can think about. Think about a time in your life where your tolerance was tested. And why it was tested. And then I guess the other is how you could have faced that test better. Did you get that? Who's taking the notes? Who's the VIHE?
Yeah, this is Rameshwari Devijati.
Oh, thanks, Rameshwari. Okay, so I'll look forward to seeing you on Friday. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Aniruddha Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Presenter. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to your illustrious students.
Yeah, they are wonderful. Hope you like them.
I do. Yeah.
So see you soon again.
Yes, thanks, Prashanta.
Haribol.
Voice to Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.